All right. Thank you so much. I'm excited to kick off the first of 3 decision briefings on the budget. As you can tell by the name of the session, we are doing things differently. This is not a budget workshop of the past where a fully baked budget is presented to the public. Rather, this is a decision briefing where one execution of the numbers will be presented along with a discussion of multiple courses of action, or COAs, that the town board may or may not choose to take. We are proceeding in this manner because, in thinking through the budget process with my team, I knew I wanted to approach the budget in a way that was more transparent, public, and easily understood. It seemed to me that in order to accomplish this goal, some conventions would need to be changed. They needed to change because under past practices, the town's finances were a little murky and a little uncertain. For example, the letter sent in 2021 by the Office of the State Comptroller indicated problems with the administration's budgeting. This letter contributed to a loss of confidence. So it's our job to bring things back into balance. Now, you may know Beth Greenwood, our new comptroller, is a former naval officer, and thus the term decision briefing and courses of action. These are tools that she saw were very effective in her 27 years in the Navy as she worked through complex decisions. So to start this process, I asked the comptroller for a tentative document that did not use bonding, or as I like to refer to them, as credit cards, and that accounted for revenues and expenditures as accurately as possible. To do this, the comptroller and the departments conducted a 5-year analysis of actual expenditures and revenues. So this is not a rollover budget where numbers are merely adjusted from last year. Instead, it is intended to be a rebuild. Why did I ask to start from a budget document with no bonding? That request was based on the prior administration's history of using quite a lot of short-term and long-term debt. And it is our position and the positions of the town's financial advisors that we reconsider these practices, especially, but not exclusively, because the economy has changed and interest rates are rising. Overall, the town's debt is approximately $38 million. And approximately $22 million of that debt was from funding the necessary rebuild of the wastewater treatment plant between 2016 and 2018. Now, there's no question that towns like Niskuna need to bond for large municipal projects. What we are contending with, however, is smoothing the past practice of using short-term credit. So what do I mean? The previous administrations had been bonding to pay for equipment, and that depreciates quickly. Ideally, these are not the items that you may want to buy for credit. So, for example, police cars. They typically have a lifespan of 2 to 3 years. Industrial scale lawnmowers, a lifespan of 8 to 9 years. Pickup and 1-ton dump trucks, that last 10 to 12 years, with a midlife rebuild that's done in-house. So portions of this short-term debt, they can be rolled in bonding programs for 5 years, but this strategy includes high fees and transaction costs. And at the end of 5 years, the debt is due. For 2023, the amount due is approximately $487,000, and it reflects the last administration's purchases in 2018. In 2024, this amount jumps to $1.3 million to cover purchases the last administration made in 2019. And then there's $1.5 million due in 2025. So you see, each year going forward, we'll be addressing the results of the prior use of short-term credit. And in these briefings, we will discuss reasonable courses of action, which may include converting short-term debt into long-term debt or paying it off from fund balance. Both options have trade-offs that we will discuss in these briefings. But this discussion of our debt profile, I felt was important, and it was necessary to these briefings. And as I turn the briefing over to Comptroller Beth Greenwood, there are also some tough truths to be delivered regarding the prior administration's practice of overstating revenue in annual budgets. But as you listen, it's also important to know that you're going to hear that we have a very healthy fund balance and favorable Moody's rating. We will look at the budget in the scope of 5 years of expenses and revenues, explore past practices, and we will chart a moderate and predictable course forward. Now, I will address some housekeeping issues, important dates, and expectations. We have a lot to review and an ambitious schedule. There is no time at this point allotted for public comment at these briefings. Instead, public comment is invited on the October 25th public hearing where the preliminary budget will be discussed. After the public hearing, we will have 3 weeks to consider feedback from residents in refining the final budget. We will vote on the final budget on November 17th. So again, no public comment today. The work done in the briefings over the next 3 sessions contribute to the preliminary budget, which will be issued before the next town board meeting, and the public hearing, which are both held on October 25th. Then the vote on the final budget is at the town board meeting on November 17th. And now I'm going to turn the floor over to our town comptroller, Beth Greenwood.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. I just wanted to kind of review for everybody how we went about working through this with all the various department heads, and I will be as quick as I can. I know we're already behind. As the supervisor stated, for the budget process, we looked back for 5 years. We did it in 2 different ways. We took all the numbers as they were, but then we averaged 2018 and 2019 on one column. We averaged 2020 and 21 on another column based on the pre-COVID timeframe. So we had to look at the 4 years across, then 2 sets of averages, and then a total average of the 4 years. So as we sat with each of the department heads, they could see some of their costs were significantly affected either up or down by COVID. So we could kind of hold that in the back of our minds as we were considering them. Once we took these numbers, we kind of assessed them, and my department made recommendations of what we thought each of the department heads would need in each one of their lines, both expenditures and revenues, based on those past histories. We took those recommendations to all the department heads, broke them up, each their own portion of the budget, and then sat down with the department heads in a collaboration to look at the numbers we had estimated that they might want, and then talk about what they were planning to do with their department and whether the numbers we came up with would meet their needs. Some were adjusted up, some were adjusted down based on the conversations we had. Then we took that summary based on the understanding of what the department heads thought they would need to carry on with all the current duties they carry out in the town to hold the services at the same level. And that's what we put together for the supervisor for the initial crack at the budget. You can see from that budget that we're not where we want to be in terms of the tax rate. We fully recognize that. In my conversations with the supervisor, she felt it was really important that the board as a whole work through these decisions on how we go about addressing that tax rate. So we basically have 3 main courses of action that can be taken, and I want you to hold them in your mind as you listen through these discussions with each of the department heads. The first option would be a cut to services. Obviously, that's something that's a very tough decision. A couple of the services we offer, I do recommend that we're going to have to increase prices a bit if we want to continue offering them so that we can keep up with the cost of doing business. I'll have specifics when we get to those sections of the budget, but I think it's important for the board to understand that the services that we offer, they all do have a cost, and some of our costs are falling behind what it's actually taking to run those programs, particularly yard waste as a transfer station and some of our community rec programs with regard to the pool. We're just not able to keep up right now with what we're currently charging. Bonding for equipment, and the supervisor has addressed this fairly extensively. We did have a long discussion with our fiscal advisors this year. They are strongly recommending against bonding any kind of a short-term for equipment with the rates what they are currently. So that is something that we would like to kind of keep everybody in mind. We are asking them to consider for us this. We've put in the budget to pay off the first round of the consolidated bans that are coming due this year. We have a request out for them to consider how much it would be for us to basically roll the rest of all that debt into one long-term bond rather than re-rolling it and paying it off each year. They're currently working on those calculations and have not gotten them back to us yet. We will have those hopefully this week. So we're looking at several different options on how to address our debt and possibly reconsolidate it. Finally, the third option is using additional fund balance. We did build the use of some fund balance into this budget, not very much when you consider the amount of equipment that's been rolled back into this budget rather suddenly. We currently have fairly healthy fund balance. If you look on the fund balance page of the budget, it's about the third page in for each of the funds where we are. A couple of them are now to the point where we are going to have to set up reserves for both general and highway fund. Our own fund balance policy says that that money is to be used either to maintain a lower tax rate or to be put into a reserve. I believe we have enough to be able to do both of those things in order to ensure that we don't raise taxes over amount. I won't read off all the numbers. It'll take too long, but you've got them printed out there in your sheets you can take a look at. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Chief of Police to start going through his section of the budget and talk about what he would like to be doing with it this year.
So when are we going to be able to ask you questions about the figures on that page, the fund balance history projections? Can we do that now? or-
Absolutely, whenever you'd like to.
Okay, so I'm taking a look at that in the first column that you've got for 12/31/21. It says estimated fund balance. Is that what the actual fund balance was at the end of 21? It says estimated.
Oh, my apologies. That is the actual for that
Okay,
one.
so that's the actual balance.
Correct.
And then you're estimating for the end of this year that we're going to be up about $1.2 million.
Yes, and that does take into consideration the payment that's due for the police retirements coming out of that already. And with the interest rates we're seeing, that's where we think we're going to be.
So the police retirement's already out of that. It's
Yes.
not in that figure. So in looking at that, I'm saying to myself, well, then that means we're having a pretty good year.
Interest rates have gone up significantly. I'm sure you've all seen in the news, they've gone up 75 basis points twice already in the last couple of months. That's one of the things I'll get to when we get down to revenues. I actually need to increase our interest revenues yet again from when this budget was put together because we've seen a significant increase yet again, which is very good. I'm happy to say
That's
that.
great. That's why I'm asking. I want to get confirmation on these figures. And when you put on here appropriated, do you mean that that's what was actually spent or that was what was budgeted to be used for fund balance?
That's what's been spent.
That's what's actually been spent. Okay, thank you. That's the questions I had about that page. Thank you.
Beth, I'd just like to clarify, the 499,333, that is what you're appropriating in 2023 or what you're saying has been spent currently in 2022?
That was what was appropriated for 2023. Sorry, I apologize. I answered you incorrectly.
So you're saying this
That's the planned
499 number
appropriation for 2023.
is in the budget,
Yes.
this tentative budget to be spent?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I think I understood it that way also. That's what you're proposing in this tentative budget to appropriate
That's
499
where we
here.
started. Yes,
Okay.
initially.
Okay, and reflecting the estimated balances for the end of the year is the line above that.
Correct. And once we get to the end of this year, we'll put the actuals for 2022 back up above it.
Right.
Yep.
Good evening. I am Chief Jordan Koshin, the Skinner Police Department. Something we did last year, I don't know what had done prior or previous or not, that we were asked to do again this year was to speak about some achievements based on the current budget cycle for 2022. And so I'm just going to touch on some of those achievements as quickly as possible regarding the police department. One of our major goals for this year was to be committed to hiring more staffing through the budget process. And our agency committed to tirelessly working to increase staffing back to pre-pandemic staffing levels through continuous recruitment of both new officers and lateral transfers. To date, we have hired 4 police officers in this fiscal year. These new officers are both diverse and talented. This achievement has allowed our police department to continue to successfully meet the needs of the community. We do still have more work to do, but we're going to continue this goal and work towards filling the remaining vacancies into 2023. A second achievement we had, which was also a goal, was our agency wanted to purchase new technologies to assist with transparency of policing for our community and police department members, specifically purchasing new patrol dash cameras and purchasing new body-worn cameras. Our agency, including Detective Hishem Kafaga, in conjunction with Niskuna Systems Administrator Seth Goldstein, the Comptroller's office, specifically the town of Niskuna Comptroller Beth Greenwood, worked diligently as a team together to finalize a grant through the Small Rural and Tribal Body-Worn Camera Program, and was actually recently recognized by the program directors as one of the top performers of the grant program with a perfect score in the startup phase and policy development. We expect to receive this purchased equipment shortly, and we will continue the implementation of the program into 2023. The last achievement I want to talk about was our agency has continued to work with the Police Implementation Task Force towards the implementation of the recommendations of the Niskuna Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Plan. Our agency has issued policies through implementation as a part of these recommendations, including over 100 updated policies in our new Lexipol policy manual, including and additionally annual trainings on bias and procedural justice through Police One Academy and community outreach, including expansion of our Coffee with a Cop program and proactive community contact model. Our agency has also, through the reform process, worked to identify and apply for grant funding beyond what has ever been historically applied for the continued growth of our agency, all while being fiscally responsible to our residents. We applied for funding through the COPS program, which is a federal program to hire police officers, to support our department by potentially funding an additional 2 police officer positions, which, if awarded, would expand our department to 32 full-time police positions, including a community resource officer and an officer dedicated towards accreditation for our agency. This is just a short list of the many successes of our agency for 2022. And lastly, but most importantly, I just want to touch on how thankful I am for the hard work, dedication, and commitment of our department members. We could not have accomplished so much this year without your efforts, so thank you. So moving on to the current budget cycle. And I'm just going to touch on some highlights, and then I'm going to leave it open for questions, obviously. First and foremost, in this current budget that we're requesting through our department, we want to continue to fund and to build staffing. In this budget, there's a continued funding for 30 full-time police officers with the ability to fund up to 32 sworn officers should we be awarded the COPS grant, as well as fund administrative staffing levels to support the oversight and implementation of our new policy manual, accreditation, and body-worn camera program. A second highlight would be to continue to fund new and replace outdated equipment. Our requests for this budget cycle would replace outdated ASPETONs, AEDs, radar equipment, and generators, to name a few, as well as provide for the purchase of helmets and shields to protect our officers in the event of active critical incidents. Our requests would also allow, from equipment line, for the department to continue purchasing vehicles on an annual rotational schedule. Last highlight that I want to mention in this proposed budget would allow for our department to continue our work towards the recommendations of the Niskuna Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Plan, including funding a proposed analyst position to continue our progress through reform and further assess ways our agency can improve and better support the needs of our community. So I thank everybody for their considerations regarding this budget, and I'll leave it open to questions now.
You want me to go?
Come on, Bill.
Okay, well, you know I got questions.
Give me questions.
I got questions. Okay, so I'm happy to see that we're putting the vehicle purchases in as budget lines. You know, I've been pushing for that for many, many years, so I'm glad to see that that is in here. I went to a meeting at the county about the dispatch center. You factored in, I hope, an increase for that. I see the figures in here for that.
I don't have the correct figure yet. They
Well,
haven't
and
sent
that might be a little hard because I'm sure you won't know what it is until they give it to you, which they haven't basically produce
And
yet.
that, I have not factored that in yet. I left it flat right now, and we need to increase that. And I
There'll
know-
be an increase there because we've given approval for some salary increases to the dispatch center to retain employees and get new employees there. So that will be coming. And then I look at the miscellaneous and contractual line going from 16 to 38.5. So can you speak to that for me?
Yes, that line actually is, that's where the Lexipol system has been added in, the software system, as well as the SUNY analyst, the DEI consult.
Okay. And so is the Lexipol 16 and then the analyst is 20 on top of that, give or take, or?
Yes.
Yeah, the SUNY analysts, we project to be potentially around $19,000, somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay.
The 16 previous is not simply Lexipol. This line, and it's something that the Comptroller, as well as Janet Wynn and I are looking to clean up. The miscellaneous contractual has kind of been the catch-all fund for a lot of various things. So we decided to sort of increase that line because it has been the catch-all because we've had to do budget modifications to move money in there for annual costs.
So can you speak to me a little bit more about this SUNY analyst position and what that position is going to be and what that person's going to do?
Certainly. So as a part of reform, one of the things that they had talked about was having sort of an outside set of eyes continually do analysis for the police department, specifically to monitor progress regarding the initial analysis that was done through the CNA report. One of the things that the supervisor, myself, and the Police Implementation Task Force had talked about was that we needed to broaden the horizons a little bit, and we needed to look for ways to analyze analyze how not only the police department, but we as the town of Niskayuna can start doing more surveys regarding services and analysis and seeing what is actually the services that people are requesting in conjunction with being able to do internal analysis. The best way I can describe it to you is we are going to open the books to our data internally for the police department component of it to really look at and analyze how we can fine tune and continue to grow from a community contact standpoint, customer service standpoint. There's going to be racial bias data audits, traffic data audits. There's going to be everything that we have been discussing through the reform process. And this person would basically be there assisting us on a part-time basis to analyze those things.
Okay, so this is going to pick up a little bit after what CNA did. And I guess we had some conversations with people in the department at that time, the chief and some of the officers that are still there, about some of the data that they got from CNA and some of the recommendations, if you will, and results that they gave didn't really reflect some of the policing that was going on here in Niskayuna, right? It was just a numbers-based approach, okay? And your officers, rightly so, were saying that to me and to other town board members, that we want to, look at that and evaluate these things. And we had conversations about that. Some of them were in the reform meetings and some were, basically conversations that we had off to the side. So
Yeah, I think that, and just if we're just going to touch on the CNA report, I think CNA even addressed the fact that there were some shortcomings from the analysis due to lack of data that we were not collecting. And we are starting to implement and I didn't put it as a success, but we have legitimately created systems to obtain that data more real time for correct analysis in terms of a more complete picture to the best of our ability. And again, part of this analyst position is not only to build a partnership with what is a premier criminal justice program in the nation, if not the world, but also to have sort of that unbiased review that isn't Chief Koshan saying this is the data, but somebody who is analyzing this that is unbiased, that is not a part of our town and involved to say, this is actually what these things should be looking like, and let's build a model to get better by it.
So is that person going to be meeting with your committee and your committee chair and having those conversations with them and the supervisor?
I don't think we've gotten that far in terms of how operationally it's going to work. I've had conversations with the folks at SUNY Albany to basically say, we have an office, we have space, we have a computer, and I'll open up the books. So we're at the point now where we were going to sort of wait through the budget process to see if this was in fact going to happen, to then determine the full scope. Because one of the things we had talked about was not just the police department utilizing this. This analyst is going to be used in a multitude of ways throughout the town, through the DEI committee, all of the rest for services, for how do we upgrade infrastructure for folks that need infrastructure updates to support whatever they have going on and things of that nature. So it's not just a police component. We were trying to build it where it was a recommendation. It needs to be a part of our police agency, but it's going to do so much more. But we put it there for now. I think the total amount in just our line to start having.
Is that just the chief's portion, or is that the total expense, or is that going to be in other lines in the budget?
We started out with it just in the police department because that was the initial concept, was starting to work with the police department. And once they got started to see if they needed to go into other places, then it would become part of a shared services line if it were going through other portions of the town.
Okay, thank you.
Realistically, I think we envision the first year will absolutely be dedicated to the needs of the police department, at least a year. And then moving forward, seeing how that service could be used throughout the town.
Okay. The payroll number at the top. So I guess the way we sort of, at least in my own opinion, I kind of look at that, right? So you're down with staffing numbers, but you've got certain amount of patrols you have to have certain staffing. And we've got that in this number to cover if we have to use overtime and that sort of thing, because we are having difficulty finding new officers.
Yes, so we have fully funded all 30 positions. Even the ones that are vacant are noted as vacant, but they are fully funded, and they're fully funded at a level that if we were to get a lateral transfer in, we would be able to cover that salary. Then we've got the second line down, you'll see is the police overtime line, which is a little bit on the thin side, but what we would do is if we use more overtime when we're understaffed, right? So basically those lines kind of work hand in hand. So that is funded as though we were fully staffed. If we are not, then we pull from the lines where there are vacancies and we adjust that into the overtime as needed.
I understand that. And I know that that's difficult because sometimes officers will take that, but then they'll take it in comp time, correct?
Yes,
And so that's very hard to put a number on all of that.
it is. And that's where when we looked back over 5 years and we took the historical look of what we've needed for various different departments in terms of both comp time and then out of title pay and various other things, we build that in to a level that we feel is appropriate, not inflating it, but not underfunding it either. It's a little bit of a balance there.
Okay. So I think I got one more question. You started speaking about equipment and stuff like that, and you talked about shields and helmets. Did I hear that correctly?
You did.
So do we have that equipment right now? And I guess that just sort of, that really
We do.
got my,
We do. While you were public
Yeah.
safety chair, we actually received a grant in conjunction with, I believe, the county to purchase some of that equipment. And every car has a ballistic shield and a helmet. What we're looking to do is further expand that program because helmets are sort of fit to individuals. And it would make more sense if everyone was issued a helmet so that they had that. Because currently, as it stands, we do not have enough helmets for the entire police department.
yeah, then I guess it's equipment you want to make sure you have, but you hope you never
Hope we
have
never
to
use it. Hope we never use it.
never have to use, I guess. But I guess you're saying that it's something that you do feel that's necessary for the
do.
officers to have.
I do. I absolutely do.
And so, and let me just I'll speak to that particular line. So in that 2000 equipment line, we've built in money for the AEDs, for the license plate readers, the ASP batons, the helmets, and the shields are all based on the estimates that the chief was able to give to me. We've built all of those into that line.
Did you not get new AEDs when we got new AEDs for the rest of the town facilities? I'm just asking. In my recollection that we did have replacement AEDs throughout the
So this is something we're looking at townwide in conjunction with Charlie Bergami. It feels like a short time ago, but the AEDs we have townwide are going to be obsolete soon, to the point where I had to contact a new company that bought out the previous company and upgrade their software to download an AD report that we used just yesterday that took us 3 hours. They're going to cease manufacturing the batteries here at some point, according to Charlie speaking with the vendors. This is a program that I'm actually, let me preface this by saying this. We're looking to fund that. I'm actively seeking grant opportunities to attempt to purchase these so that we don't spend town monies. But we do need to upgrade the equipment however we fund it.
Okay, and to my question is, all the AEDs for the town in here or just the police department?
Just the police department.
Just the police department.
Yes.
And did you get new AEDs? And I don't know what the time frame is, and I don't know how long these things last, 5 years, 3 years.
I don't believe that you're saying new ADs, and I'm saying it was many years ago. I believe. I don't think it was.
Well, it probably was 3 years ago or more. I know that we did do some replacements of the AEDs at, like Town Hall and Highway Garage.
So for instance, we just replaced a battery. They're good for 4 years. So it was over 4 years ago, the last time we made a battery purchase for the particular AD we have. So I believe, I didn't look back, but I believe that these ADs are 5 or 6 years old. But again, I think at that time, the technology that was purchased and the ADs that were purchased were, if things age out, they were probably like middle-aged and they weren't brand new. And part of the reason that we also need to update them was, I don't know at that time why the decision was made, or if our local emergency services changed what they use, but our pads, when you disconnect the pads from ours, they do not connect to our other fire departments with the current ADs that they're using, which is not the end of the world. You can pull the pads up and put new ones on, but it's a seamless transition. Anyone in the fire department can understand. You plug, unplug, plug in, and you go.
Right. You put it on there and then they show up. They want to be able to put their
So we're
equipment
looking
on.
to go to that sort of platform where it was a plug and play between all the emergency services.
Thank you.
Beth, or
Go ahead, Jason. That's
Chief.
all I got.
can you just speak again to what that line actually covers, the 2000 line? It was AEDs, helmets and shields.
Also license plate readers and the ASP batons.
As a whole, though, that is an equipment line for, explain it better. It's, I get caught up with the language. It's a very specific equipment line, right?
Capital equipment.
Capital equipment. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. These things are, if we were going to buy things that are, there's a town policy based upon this line, that they're highly theft items.
They're
They're
specific items.
they have serial numbers, things like that, that the town keeps a running inventory of these things as part of that capital purchase. So.
And do you expect that the entire fleet needs a new license plate readers? Every month?
No. Our license plate reader is a number of years old. Again, we'd like to expand to a secondary one, or replace the current one or replace the current one. It would just be to try to purchase a single license plate reader is what that would be.
So it's not the readers that go on the back of the cars or on the roof of the, or it is?
It is.
Okay.
That specific one,
But it would only be one unit that you're replacing?
yes. That specific one was to try to replace one of those.
Okay.
And again, it sort of depends. Like, we funded it. We put it, when I initially spoke to Beth and Jen about this, we said, what's a reasonable number to try to fund some of this equipment? All of those pieces of equipment may not be funded based on pricing with what is currently being proposed, but that is the pool of money with which we would prioritize. Like, obviously ADs have to be purchased, right? We don't have a choice. So that pool of money, if it takes up and we don't buy helmets and we don't get, LPRs can be as much as $12,000, right? Again, we're looking at grant monies and things of that nature. But what we're attempting to do is say, here's the equipment we think we need. Let's begin purchasing pieces of that out of that fund.
Okay, so you're not necessarily expecting to purchase all of this equipment with that 38?
Pieces of it.
Okay.
Obviously the ADs have to happen. The LPR, I would prioritize helmets over that, right? And depending on the pricing at that time, it can be a lot of different things. Our prices are changing real time. I looked the other day at helmets, And the ones that I ran a sort of generic number to get a quote for Beth are now, you can't buy them, right? It's a difficult world that we're all experiencing with regards to making purchase of things. But this line was funded with the intention of attempting to purchase these things, yes.
Thank you.
And actually, that Chief makes a really good point with that. Remember, we sat down with the department heads when they gave us estimates on most of these costs was back in August. A lot of these costs, we're double checking on things, but inflation is killing us this year, so.
Thank you, Janet. Right? Time flies, huh?
Any other questions?
One more. This is usually how we would close it out with all the department heads. This budget here and these numbers, does this adequately fund your department for the year?
I'm going to respond the same way I did last year. I'm never going to turn down more money to build a more robust police department. But yes, this budget would adequately staff us to continue the exceptional service that we try to provide to our community.
Once
Thank
I
you.
increase the UCC line
Yes.
Thank you.
to the correct number.
Yes.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you, Chief Koshin.
Yeah, we can be a little bit flexible. I wasn't sure how much time people would need, so. Seth? Yeah. I had no idea how many questions people would have. I wanted to give ample time for questions, so we can, well, maybe. I don't know how many questions you're gonna have for everyone else, so I didn't want to rush anything. All right, there we go.
Hello.
All right. I will turn it over to you.
1680. Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. I was asked to give you a rundown of what we've accomplished so far this year, and what my plans are for next year. So, we'll start off with the room that we're in. I got the hearing impaired system working again. I improved it so that you can be out in the if there's overflow, you can be out in the lobby and have a TV that shows what is being broadcast to YouTube as well as the audio. Also took out some of the equipment that was in the recording room that was obsolete. Because you can't buy VHS tapes anymore to record on. So, at the beginning of 2021, I gave all the town board members a briefing. I'm proud to say that there are no more red servers. We built a brand new backup server, which is now in place. We shut down the last Windows 2008 server that was acting as a backup server and a print server. Built 2 new servers for the body cam project because the new body cams and new dash cams are going to be taking up a lot of digital storage, and we have to plan for the future. So we built 2 servers for that. Although we ordered this stuff in 2021, the what interactive whiteboard and new technology and new projector for the muster room is in, and I'm looking forward to Jordan offering some pretty amazing trainings to his department. Put in a new VoIP phone system. Got rid of the traditional locally hosted phone system, went to a full VoIP internet hosted system. Which coincidentally, when we were installing it, we had a phishing attempt with a virus infection that infected most of Town Hall. And that was dealt with over the weekend, and we had very little downtime. I'm proud to report that. I implemented a new DNS program, which basically proactively blocks requests. So if somebody clicks on something that they shouldn't, it should hopefully block them before they get to a malware site or a phishing site. When that program first started, and it does give an error message, when that program first started, we were getting over 3,000 attempts to reach those types of sites. We are down to less than 50 a week. So people are starting to learn. So what not to click on. We implemented a new help desk and remote maintenance program. From any computer in Town Hall, you can submit tickets that are trackable and easy for me to keep on track, because not everything is needs to be done right now type of thing, and those type of things tend to fall through the cracks being one-man department. I can't remember everything, unfortunately. We also implemented a new antivirus, which is cloud-based. So real-time notifications of virus threats, like the one that occurred the weekend of the phone system, right before the weekend of the phone system. So it helps me get on top of things much quicker. Just recently, I know I've been keeping track of all the stuff that I've been finding in across town, and technology things that we're paying for that we probably don't need to be paying for. This year, I added another $4,000 to that total in items that were remnants from when dispatch was still here. So still in progress. We're hopefully this weekend we will be moving to the cloud email and shutting in the next coming weeks. We'll be shutting down our on-prem Exchange server. Very excited about that. I've been in the process of cleaning up the server and network closet upstairs, which is a project that is very time consuming, but rewarding because it'll make life easier when trying to diagnose things here. We have a new internet provider coming in. We're in the build out phase, so they should be coming down the road in the next month or two. That will save the town, I believe, $300 a month, plus be twice the speed. So that's a nice perk. We will be changing out the town hall router, the main town hall router, to coincide with that speed changeover, because the current router is not capable of that speed. The new router is much more secure. We will be taking the because there's currently two routers in town hall. We're going to take one of those down to the wastewater treatment plant to recycle it and improve the security down at the wastewater treatment plant. I don't like throwing equipment out if we can help it. So next year, so 2021 and 2022, I was mostly focused on the physical and network security of the infrastructure here. I sat down with Beth and I basically laid out my 3 to 5 year plan. And we're currently, Windows 10 is going end of life and Windows 11 has come out. So more than half of our computers all across town are not Windows 11 compatible. So to stay current, we're going to need to replace at least 25 in the next year and then another 25 the year after. The switches are end of life. The network switches in Town Hall are end of life. There are a couple that are still good that I'd like to bump up the speed on some, push down the ones that are not end of life and get rid of the ones that are end of life before we have a failure and then the network goes down. So something else that we're going to be working on for next year is a new web provider. We talked about that in finance. The contract right now is with Elena to get approval. And I also, with the new network equipment, we're going to be able to provide MFA-based VPN instead of screen sharing, which should make employees more effective when they're working remotely. There are a couple things to note in the budget. There's a couple lines that got added that weren't in my budget last year, which is part of the increase. One of them is the part-time services, which are the people that do the recordings of the meetings. So I'm not here doing the recordings.
And just that had previously been, that line had previously been under the town board. And so that's been moved. It just made more sense to, since that employee worked for Seth, to put that line under his department.
Okay. And then the 4411, which is the computer services recreation. That was something that Lori was paying out of her budget, but is technology related. So it's the software package that does the recreation management. So.
Yeah. And again, that's just one that was moved from a different part of the budget. It's not a new additional item. It's just it was just moved. Since all the other computer services were under Seth's lines, it made sense to keep that one with the other ones.
Was there any increase to that line, or did it stay the same as it was moved from?
It's the
Lori's-
same. It's the same cost. It's just moved from one location.
Just moved from one department to another?
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, the increase in my budget mostly is to make sure that we're not falling farther behind technology-wise. Like I said, we have to pretty much replace 2/3 of our computer fleet in the next 2.5 years. So that's where the additional money is going.
And that's that 2,000 line that you'll see that has increased. And that was why it was the 3-year process to replace the storage and the computers.
So that's for 25 next year and 25 the year after, or 25 this year and 25 next year?
It's actually 25 this year, 25 next year, and then whatever remains in my budget that I can allocate towards computer, because it's about 60 computers that are not compliant, plus the other computers they're over 3 years old already. So I'm expecting some failures to occur. We had a couple already this year, so just from sheer age.
Yeah. And just to speak to that, we've seen that particularly in our department, because a lot of the systems we're going to, especially with our new bank, the processes they use are very much online, but it requires the computer to run constantly. And our department has burned up 2 computers recently because they were so old, they weren't compatible with that level of functionality, and they literally melted. So we need to catch up the technology. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And we're with the type of banking we're doing now, there again, pluses and minuses, right? So we have check readers. So we're able to take deposits right here in Town Hall. Between that and the pickups we now have, we do not have to have any of our town employees carrying any money whatsoever out of Town Hall. It's much safer for our employees and for our banking systems, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, the computing power necessary to do that sort of banking with these check readers and the direct hookups into the banks through their software, as you can imagine, is very secure. And so they're very computer intensive. And the older computers, unfortunately, just aren't quite up to snuff for that. So we're seeing that across the board, that just the technology, it can't keep up. So we felt like this kind of a 3-year replacement plan for everything It is a little bit steep to do that, but it's well worth it to keep everybody functional across town hall.
Can you speak to the types of computers you'll be using to replace?
Yes, so we're gonna go a mixture of laptops and desktops. And traditionally laptops were much more expensive. But with a docking station, which allows an employee to just plug their laptop in, which gives access to their dual monitors, everything, basically it's one wire to plug in to make everything work on their desk. It's a $75 difference. So right now, I have a laptop. I also have a desktop. Beth has a laptop. She also has a desktop. Most of the department heads, we've been double purchasing. So for that $75 difference, the department heads and the employees that have been working remotely during COVID that were capable of doing that are going to get laptops. All the other employees are going to get desktops. Any department head that has a desktop that's Windows 11 compatible will get pushed down to an employee or a spot that is not as critical. So between getting the laptops and going to the MFA-based VPN, it'll make those that are working remotely much more efficient and consolidate the purchasing. So we're not buying, a laptop and a desktop for certain employees.
I got a couple more questions. Can you back up a little bit and speak to the whiteboard in the PD? That's in your budget, that's in the PD department, and is that piece of equipment usable anyplace else in the town, or that's going to be permanently
That's
installed
permanently in the
PD?
Just like the the large format printer that's being purchased for engineering. Yes, other departments can use it if it's physically mounted in the muster room. If other departments need to use it for a training, and I'm sure Jordan's not using it all the time, I don't see why they couldn't go in there to do that. At some point, I'd like to, when the funds allow, but we're talking down the road, make it so that we have a short throw projector, so we don't have wires in the middle of the room and the stand and that type of stuff for this room. But it just made sense. Jordan wanted to get back to doing training in the house and that type of thing. So
And that was a projector and a board?
yes,
And what was the cost of that?
I believe it was about $4,000. The training system was about $2,000.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
and some of that came out of his budget, some came out of my budget.
So my next question could be a tricky one, I guess, for your department. You're one person here, right?
Mhm.
So what would be your suggestions for some backup, if you will, for yourself? We have backups for our computer systems and everything else, but where's the backup for Seth?
Right now, that's a good question. We do have a couple different vendors that do provide support. I've kind of limited the amount that they provide. What I had suggested many moons ago, but we kind of just too many other things going on at the same time, too many fires going on that had to be put out. What I had suggested was a shared services agreement with Rotterdam and whatever other local municipalities. That way, if I go on vacation, their IT person cover for me and vice versa, and almost act as a force multiplier type deal. It's something I definitely want to go back into and try to get going because
I'd be very supportive of that.
okay.
And to that end, Seth and I did actually start conversations both with the IT department in Rotterdam and also with the county. The county wasn't interested. They didn't feel that the systems were as compatible. but we do have a lot of the same systems that Rotterdam does. Our Munis system, for example, that all of our different departments use is the same. And a lot of our other systems are very similar. And they also have a one-man show there. So I think he was also interested in having that same kind of support. And obviously they know each other. So it's something that we have started kind of having that conversation offline, but we hadn't formalized any more.
Well, I think it's important that we stay with that and try to get to some sort of agreement, right? 'Cause
Absolutely.
having one person in the head of IT, it's risky, right?
Right. Knock on wood, we're in.
I know, but we want you to be able to take some time off, go on a vacation and feel like, okay, there's somebody else that can kind of
Yeah.
step in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're not getting calls. Obviously some things you can do remotely and stuff, and quite a bit probably, but still, it's not a good way to conduct business.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad to hear you thought about that, and hopefully I'll be asking about that again. Don't worry.
I'll hold you to that.
I'll be asking. I'll hold you to get it done. Okay. One more question. The body camera servers, what do you plan? What is your long-term plan for all that data?
Well, we've planned out at least 5 years. Okay. It's the two servers. One's going to reside here in Town Hall. The other one's going to reside at the water garage. The one that's residing at the water garage will be basically a backup to the one here. Cloud backup does not make sense at that scale. Just having an offsite backup does. We're also going to try to get a portion of it locally backed up within Town Hall. Okay. Up until 2 months ago, there were police department dash cams and detective files, like their photos for the cases, that weren't ever backed up. So we resolved that part. But I foresee 5 years, potentially 7, okay, with the existing servers that I just built. But by that point, the camera should be out of date, and we're going to probably have to upgrade again. So we're going to have to go for another grant, and we're going to have to do this whole thing over again, unfortunately, but fortunately.
Okay, well, at least that's planning ahead for 5 to 7 years. Back to sort of my point about you being a one-man department head and everything else. Is there some sort of black book, or are you a very good person that writes down policies and procedures that, again, God forbid anything ever happened to you or you were not available, that someone, this Rotterdam person or anybody might be able to come in and...
All you have to do, and I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but all you have to do is break open my desk drawer or have Charlie figure out a way to unlock it. And all the password list is there and the network diagrams.
I didn't need that much information, but okay.
Right. Well,
Change the location now.
Yeah, well, no, that should be in a locked safe someplace. Like, I don't know, supervisor's office, PD, someplace, right?
right. Well,
okay.
and
That could be like a ransomware thing. Something happens to you, right? Nobody
they
knows.
kidnap me.
Well, whatever, right,
I'm pretty fat. They can't carry me.
And we have problems. We have problems with the system here.
Right. No, absolutely. But
So what's better, in your opinion, the shared services or having another outside vendor as the backup entity?
in my opinion, something is better than nothing. Okay. My predecessor used to purchase hours from a company down in Albany. They no longer sell blocks of hours, so it would be as per needed. There are documents that have, what company that are on my share drive of what company is for each system and contact numbers. So anybody that is a competent IT person should be able to come in with the crumbs I've left and figure it out. Okay. So, in the case of emergency with Munis, there's the Tyler account number and the Tyler contact, but Janet would know that. The police department stuff, Hisham knows everything that's going on over there. And he and I have had long discussions. He's a very sharp individual when it comes to technology. He has an idea of what I'm doing. So in case I do get hit by a bus, he can kind of direct whoever you bring in after me. Okay. So I've tried to educate Jamie as to what I'm doing on a regular basis. So she has an idea of what's going on here. I don't want it to be a secret, and I would like to be able to go away, but here's the good news. I did attend a conference for a week. My phone rang twice, and it wasn't major stuff. The building wasn't on fire and nothing was going crazy, but it did give me a little bit more confidence that,
You have a good system.
Yeah.
yes.
You've made a lot of incredible updates. So I think, things are running a lot more smoothly. Do we need to, in the budget, somehow account for this possible shared services or this outside entity? Is that accounted for anywhere, or do we need to add it in?
There's usually a little bit of money left over in the miscellaneous and contractual. Every once in a while, when I don't have the answer to something, I think we paid like $200 last year for me to call that consultant and ask questions. So there's always a little bit there for that potentiality. I don't think shared services wise, I don't know how that would work.
That would probably be an intermunicipal agreement. We'd probably find a way to do that to both towns' benefits without a
Right.
cost.
You get 10 days off, they get 10 days off, something like that, and you're swapping time
That
and
we would find a
accordingly
way
and
to work
whatever.
that out.
Right.
As a gentleman's agreement, basically.
Not a gentleman's agreement.
Well, we'd write it down.
Gentle person?
Yes.
Be civilized human beings.
So, and obviously, I would figure a interagency type deal would be a better thing because if it's not costing anything and I need to make a phone call or I need assistance for something, I'd be more likely to do that than.
Right, and you bounce ideas off. Hey, we got this system over here for RPD or whatever. Hey, it's working great for us.
We have
vice
lunch.
versa, all those things,
We
right?
have lunch once a month, and right now he's in the middle of a wireless project, and we're
Yeah.
talking things over and stuff like that. So it's nice being able to talk nerd.
I think that's the route we should go. I like that idea. So the last question. Do the figures in this budget for your department adequately fund the budget for your budget for the year?
I will give you the same answer Jordan did. I will never say no, we don't need more and newer, better stuff, but I believe this covers us for where we need to get to.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know which of the justices is. I assume it's Justice Swinton. I don't know that to be true. I did not realize that people would be so efficient. I appreciate that.
I have both. I took one over the document with all the numbers and $500.
Can we take like a 2-minute break? I'll pop over and ask. That way we aren't.
Yes, we're going to take a 2-minute break.
You want to scoot over so you don't feel like.
You could,
Oh, yeah, you're right.
you could move them.
Okay, I feel kind of weird.
Whose phone is that? Oh, it's probably John who's. Would it be rude for me to shush it?
You can shush it, press it, will it stop maybe? On 4. On it, I know. It was my eyes first. That's clean. It really was my eyes first. I told them, they're like, I still been part of that, everybody started. Oh, it's not. No, you can still just do it. It is. Oh, you can have this thing. There you go.
I need to go before me. No, I'm asking. Is that what you said next?
That's for you to do that.
I had to shush it.
Your alarm is going.
Sorry, I know I'm gonna go to class. Thank you, guys. And this to Jason for my.
You had nothing.
Okay, thank you. All right, cheers, everyone. Thank you, thank you.
All right. Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to hear from the town attorney, Elena Finnan.
Thank you. So what I actually did, what I thought might be helpful, because I know that the budget breaks it down, but what I did was I put together a sheet that I'll hand up to each of you. It breaks out what was paid out in salaries based on the salary schedules for 2020, 2021, and not actuals, projected for 2022. Also included in that is outside legal counsel fees and a total. And then I also put together a list of just some of the duties that the legal department does, and I'll explain reasons why I'm requesting what I'm requesting, but I'm just gonna hand that up. So just looking at numbers, obviously my budget's pretty straightforward and not very complicated compared to police and water and sewer and some of the others. But as you can see, significant savings compared to prior years this year, especially with respect to outside counsel fees. So in the past couple of years, we've expended between approximately 100,000 and 200,000 in outside counsel fees. And year to date this year, we're under 12,000. So I would say that that's a pretty big accomplishment for this board and the town and my department for this year. So going forward for next year, I am seeking additional monies for my department. I would like to have and appoint a deputy. And Bill, this kind of touches on what you discussed with Seth at the last section. We've been able to get by this year. I do work a lot of hours. I put in a lot of hours outside of just a standard 8 to 4, 9 to 5 type thing. But there have been situations in which I would like to take a vacation, or my child is sick or something comes up and I need somebody who can fill in for the meetings. Town attorney has to stand in for the town board meetings, planning board meetings, zoning board meetings. And if something comes up and there's an emergency or I can't be here, we really need to have backup. So kind of as a temporary get by for this year, we did have a resolution for outside counsel. I've tried to utilize as minimal as possible to save the town money. But I think it would be beneficial going forward to try to get somebody here part-time that can be trained, especially because if something did happen, and hopefully I'll stay healthy and there'll be no issues, but if if I had to be out for a long period of time or even a couple of weeks, there's nobody really who knows what's going on or has a substantial knowledge of what's going on to be able to just step up and not have the work pile up while I'm out and keep things flowing.
So to that point, who's going to do that search? You going to do that? The supervisor's office? How are we going to?
I would think in
forward.
conjunction, we would do that, yeah.
Okay. I think that's a good idea.
Just to clarify, in the past, we talked about possibly a paralegal. Would this take the place of that?
It would. So I know that we had that discussion, and at the time I thought it was a great idea. But when taking into account the need to have coverage for meetings in the event of an emergency, a paralegal is not going to be able to do that, unfortunately. It just depends too on what is going on in the town at any given time, as far as if I'm too busy with one thing and something else comes in, are we going to be able to have enough manpower to be able to do what's needed? Like I said, I work a lot of extra hours, so I'd like to not have to work that many extra hours, but it's also, I'm only one person. So right now I'm sprinting this month. Last month wasn't so bad. This month's a little bit of a sprint. And if something came in an emergency, I don't even know if I'd have enough time in the day myself to be able to handle some of these things. So I just want to make sure we're properly staffed and covered. And, historically we have had at least 2, if not 3 combined part-time and 1 full-time position in the department. So I'd like to be able to get back to at least 1 full-time and 1 part-time.
So we should put more in personal services then in your budget? Or are we going to put a different line for that?
I actually
How-
have budgeted for 1 full-time and 1 part-time in her personnel services line. I wasn't sure if they were going to go the route of a paralegal or a part-time attorney, so I put the same amount of money in, but I can rename that particular personnel line either to a paralegal, which sounds like it is not the direction we're going at this point. So we do have enough funding in there for a part-time attorney as well as a full-time attorney. Remember that the personnel services for the attorney is partially allocated across other funds due to the nature of the job, as would be the part-time deputy. So that's why it doesn't look like it's a
Substantial amount.
substantial amount, but it actually is in there. We also had a conversation. I did leave enough money in the legal services line from my conversations with Elena to have a separate attorney for the ethics board. Because it's my understanding that's how, if you want to talk to that a little bit, it's just to keep things appropriate.
We did a resolution earlier this year for a separate attorney for the ethics board. And the reason being that there are potential conflicts that come up over time, whether the town board is considering certain ethics issues and, vice versa. I can't sometimes, not in every case, but in some circumstances, I can't be the attorney for the town board on an ethics case and the ethics board on an ethics case. There could be simultaneous investigations, different reasons that come up that through our discussions, we had decided would be most beneficial just to have somebody on retainer for the ethics board on an as needed basis versus waiting until there's a conflict and then scrambling to try to find counsel. So I'm pretty positive that if there's been any invoices, it's been pretty minimal. I don't expect it to be a heavy load or a huge bill coming in, but I know that we capped it at 15,000 for this year and we're well under that. The under 12,000 amount that I provided was for both of our outside counsel, for the ethics board and for the attorney that we have that fills in for me at meetings when I can't be there. So I don't see any reason why we would go beyond that for next year.
What line would that go under?
The legal services line, so that
4026.
sorry.
Beth, going back to the 1,000 personal services line, and Bill, you may be able to answer this better. Can you explain the significant decrease based on the document Elena prepared over the last 2 years? It looks like at one point it was 127,000, now down to 80,000. Is that?
Yeah, there was, previously, there was a full-time town attorney and 2 part-time town attorneys. So
Okay.
they were all paid out of that line. For, you mean 2020 and 2021?
Correct, based on the document that Elena provided, though it looks like the,
Just to clarify, the document that I provided is a little bit different than the budget that you're seeing. So the document that I provided really took the salary schedules, which, as Beth indicated, that there's some personal services that are allocated across different lines. So I kind of combined that just for purposes of showing how much money was saved this year
Okay.
in outside counsel fees. Well, actually in totality, right? Like how much money's just been expended for the legal department over when compared to the past couple of years. There's a significant savings there. So, just while I wanted to kind of highlight that because I think that that's a big deal, but also explain kind of why there's an increase or a desire to increase the personal services lines for my department, because while there has been a significant cost savings this year, again, I'm only one person, it's just not sustainable. And even with that adding back a deputy line into that, it's still a significant savings compared to having a significant amount of outside counsel fees, as we've unfortunately had to over the past couple of years.
And those things sometimes happen because of certain cases or certain things that are happening in the town. So some of that's not really under our control, if you will, things that have to be dealt with. But I think that sort of staying on the same theme of that, you've done a fantastic job and you do a lot of work for us, and definitely want to try to get you some assistance.
I think it's very important for us to be properly staffed, and I think improper staffing may have had an impact on some of those large amounts. Personal opinion.
Any other questions or anything I can answer?
Can I ask about the legal research? Is that a database you're using?
So, yeah, so it's Westlaw.
Okay.
And it's just a contractual amount. I think we have a year or two left on the contract, so there's not too much I can do as far as that amount goes. But we definitely use it.
So that's per year, or is that just broken down like,
We pay monthly, but the
Monthly.
amount that's there would cover what the total year would be.
for the year?
Yeah.
Okay.
so going forward, are we going to need to look into allocating additional money to the personal services line for the possibility of a deputy attorney?
No, that's built in.
It is, okay.
It is, yes.
Do you have a breakdown, Beth, of what the amount that's allocated for a deputy total?
I do. Hold on one second. Let me. So the deputy line I had built in, hold on, I gotta unhide a few things here. I try to hide what I'm not looking at so I can.
We had built it in as a paralegal, so it would probably be a little more.
Well, because it would be a part-time position, I had built in 45,000 for that, but out of it, only a portion of that would be under this section. So about 70% of that would fall under this A fund, and the rest gets allocated across the other funds based on what work is being done. So say if there's easements being done for sewer, that gets charged against sewer and so forth. So we allocated that way.
But total, it adds up to that 45,000.
Yeah, that would be the total for that half-time position or part-time position, whatever number of hours that's what we had built in. I don't know exactly the the scope of that position at this point.
And based on the numbers we have here in the document that Elena provided and the description, is there any change to the amount allocated for the town attorney? Or is that stayed the same?
Yes, that was going to be a small increase this year. So, yeah, hers was an increase.
Thank you.
I would like to say an incredibly well-earned increase. You've done an incredible job this year, and I want to thank you for coming on when I asked you to.
Thank you. Anything else?
The usual question. Do the figures that are in this budget adequately fund your department for the next year?
My department is pretty easy. I don't have all the bells and whistles as the other. So as long as personnel is taken care of, then that's, everything else is minor. I have minor supplies. We have the contractual for legal research. There's not much more
Right.
left for my department.
Let's get you an assistant.
I would appreciate that.
Good. I'll keep on you like I got to keep on Seth now.
This is mine.
All right, thank you. And now we're going to hear from the Justice Department.
And it's just us.
It's more ominous sounding than it really is.
No. I'll sit next to you.
Oh, here, I can move over. You can both
all right.
sit. I will share.
We've got both our justices here today. Excellent.
It
Just,
so happens I was in the house.
are they waiting for you over there or you're done?
No, we're done.
Okay. Just introduce yourselves because we're on the live feed so that when you get started, everybody knows who you are if they don't. All right.
I had senior justice.
Steve Swenton, Town Justice, and apologies you get me in my dog walking clothes because I wasn't planning on being here till 7.
It's very informal.
All right.
Peter Scagnelli, Town Justice.
And they've been just having everybody kind of talk about what you've done the past year, what you're planning to do in the next year.
We've kind of treaded water. We can't set goals and stuff like some other departments can. Ethically, we run the risk of someone getting upset with us for doing so. So we handle the cases that come our way. We've obviously had an increase, as we talked about, in civil cases, in particular summary proceedings, evictions, kind of as a follow-on to.
More to come.
Right, as a follow-on to the COVID pandemic and all the financial stuff that came from that. We have a lot of cases right now, civil cases that are in limbo under state law. There are various programs for getting people's back rent paid while those applications are pending. The cases can't go anywhere by law. So we have a large number that are sitting waiting, but they're starting to,
They'll
payments are
start
being,
trickling in. soon.
right, the payments are being made, so some of them are starting to move now. But as a consequence of COVID and the restrictions we had on a number of people in the courtroom, things like that, we had switched to 2 court nights rather than 1 last year. So we added, and we moved all of our civil cases onto Thursday night. We couldn't just split all of our cases evenly because if we add a second night with criminal cases, we have to drag in the DA's office and the public defender's office, the conflict defender's office, and they all cover other courts on Thursdays or any other night we would have picked. So we moved all of our civil cases onto Thursdays, and that is probably the biggest hole right now in our budget is police overtime. We kind of killed that line because we're now running 2 nights instead of 1. So I know we moved some money over this year to cover a shortfall. I think that will get us through the end of the year, but that number is probably what we should look at least for next year on the police overtime line.
I would say, oh, yeah. And, back in the day, when I say back in the day, we're talking 2 years.
2 years ago.
Before the COVID, we'd run it on a Wednesday night. We'd start at 6 and 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock.
Sometimes.
You do everything. So you're doing police overtime even if we did it one night, way into the night. Now tonight, we we had a quick session on the civil side. So first of all, the moving it to a 2-night is better. It's better for court staff. It's better in terms of racking up the OT all on one night. So.
And we typically run with one officer on civil nights
Yeah.
because we're not bringing prisoners
We're not
in
bringing
from
prisoners
the police
in.
department. Hopefully, we don't have a civil case ending with prisoners, but, so it's really just running the door. On criminal nights, we have 2 officers, one at the door, one at the back who brings the prisoners in and out.
And the magnometer's going and, you're bringing in people from the
So-
jail.
So that's why it's a little more costly, because you got the 2 the one night and then the one.
Well, we've always
the
had
other.
2 the one night.
Right, but now we
But
got.
now
2
we've
nights.
added a second night with 1 officer, admittedly not 2. So it's not quite a doubling, but we're probably up
By a third.
a third,
Yeah.
more or
Right.
less. I think the numbers come out about that.
You feel that's the right way to run your court system, though? You think it's more efficient and it works better for you?
Well,
Absolutely. Well,
yes, definitely. And as the civil cases pick back up, if we were to try to collapse them into one night again, it kind of gums
You'd be
everything up.
spending the money on Wednesday night instead of Thursday.
Right. We'd run later on Wednesday night where we've got 2 officers. So we think it does make sense. So we are trying to group our summary proceedings, for example, one apartment complex. We try to get all their matters on one night. It's more efficient because we have the same attorney in there. So we tend to get through it a little bit
And they
quicker.
walk in with 10 evictions.
Right.
And if you have like, what is it, off of the big one over.
Hope you got Hillcrest.
Hillcrest, so if you have Hillcrest, Van Buren Apartments, and another one all in one night, you could be potentially looking at 25, 30 cases. Now, not
So-
all of them are full blown, you can plow through them, but that's the upside of the eviction.
So that's been the biggest impact on our
Yep.
budget.
And we did build in, you can see in that line that we did build in a significant increase into the police overtime budget.
And I don't know if there's a difference in the back end too. I know the way we used to budget, we always ended up coming up light on that because a lot of officers took comp time instead of actual overtime. If that's changed and they're now taking more of it as overtime, that may account for some of it as well. But we don't know what happens on that end of things.
From 21 to 22, we had a sort of a big increase in your personal services, full-time staffing. That was from one person going to full-time that was part-time, is that correct?
2 part-time to 1 full-time. So we went from 2 full-time clerks, 2 part-time clerks to 3 full-time clerks. We actually
Okay.
haven't filled the 3rd full-time clerk position since April. Number one, because we thought, because the criminal cases and traffic cases are down, we thought we could get by for now with just the 2. It's becoming a little bit of a scheduling problem. If one is on vacation and the other one's sick, we don't actually know how to do any of that stuff. So we end up
We're
with,
trained on it though.
I'm not doing Peace Guard stuff with.
We're trained on it. There's this program about tickets that go to the state. It's called T-Sled.
Yeah.
And when they gave us the, 2.5-hour seminar on it, I was like this.
Yeah.
But, and that is very technical, the data entry of those things, and we are required by the state to comply with that. It's no longer, with the carbon paper, filling out tickets and sending it off. You got to get qualified people to do that.
So the line increased, and I know this year, even though we haven't filled that position, I know we're
You're
at
gonna have to.
about where we ought to be for the year because we had a retirement with cashed out vacation and stuff that kind of ate
Mhm.
a significant chunk of that, which is part of the other reason we didn't fill it if we didn't need to, because we knew we were going to be artificially eating up some of that line, which next year we shouldn't. But that line, Peter and I were talking, we do think we should look into reclassifying the grade on our full-time clerks because, for example, one of our now senior full-time clerk who had been here for 18 years as a part-timer, because of where she started, she's close to the top end of that grade already. And to be perfectly frank, I don't know who we're necessarily going to get. I've tried luring away other clerks from other courts.
Rating.
I won't tell you which courts because the judges will get mad at me. But they make more. So they're not interested. So right now they're grade 11s. I think we both like to look into reclassifying them as 13s. So we've got more headroom on the top end of that. I don't know what that tops out at right now. I don't have the grade 13.
I don't have the schedule with me right now.
But it would certainly be several $1,000s more per step.
And,
I think.
and that filling that position is like what you're seeing out there in the general economy. It's hard to find help. You think, I think back, when I was in college, I was working for a department store making minimum wage. Now they'd laugh at you, to get paid minimum wage. Today's minimum wage to work in a store or something like that. It's just hard to get help.
So your goal is then to try to find another person, or you've got the two full-timers that have been doing it now, or are you going to then hire a part-timer that might end up going full-time? I guess I'm just trying to
I think
see where you might be going.
Part of the reason we went to 3 full-time rather than keeping it 2 part-time is training someone on a part-time basis obviously takes twice as long. And if we had to backfill 2 part-time clerk positions, which is the position we were in, it's going to take that much more to train 2 part-timers. We're drawing off our full-time clerks to train the part-timers. So we thought it would be more efficient to have a 3rd full-time. The salary ended up being about the same. We rolled the part-time line into the full-time. And we could get that person trained hopefully twice as fast. If we could steal someone from another court, it would be even better because most of us use the same systems.
The T-SLAD.
Right.
DVS.
But so far, my efforts on that front have not borne any fruit.
But you wouldn't be opposed, maybe, if you could find somebody. There must be other courts that might have part-time people, maybe that you might be able to get, if the workload is
Correct.
necessary,
And one of the ones I talked to was a part-timer, but they were looking to go full-time where they were, and they pay more. So
You're in the same boat as everybody, right?
exactly, we are. We absolutely are.
Difficult.
And I don't think we're overly naive or optimistic that we're actually going to get someone with court clerk experience in there that we can get in full-time. It would be great if we could. But I think we
That would be
realize
the home
we probably will have to hire someone who doesn't have the court clerk experience, but we can train them.
And that person would be hired at a lower rate, obviously, right?
Right.
Because they don't have any experience in
Right.
that position.
Right. So
But to answer your question, grade 13, this year topped out of 69,955.
that's the top rate. And what's the 11?
62,756.
All right, so like $7,000 on the top end for the two steps in grade. Right. So I think those are our 2 big budgetary issues. Everything else, I think, is more or less sufficient.
Oh, I know. I did have one more question for you. How is the central arraignment going?
Well, I'm it this week.
You're it.
So
I'm next week.
right. It's going well. There's a few hiccups here and there. I think it works out better for the public defender and conflict defender's office because they have scheduled arraignments and they know where they're going each time. So they're not going to Princetown at 5 and Niskayuna at 6 and Rotterdam at 7. They're not going all over. We do everybody all at once, one location. And it seems to be working pretty well.
And from the Niskayuna perspective. So under the old system, they'd make an arrest at 2:00 in the morning, let's say at the DWI. Now you've got somebody who's operating the breathalyzer, somebody's in off the road. Now you have 2 people down that should be out on patrol, right? And they're waiting for us to get here, although we're here, if we get the call at 2:00 in the morning, we're in the courtroom at 2:15. Okay, but meantime, you're tying up resources. Now, if they make an arrest at 2:00 in the morning, they do whatever paperwork and take them off to the jail, and they're done.
And we
They're
see them
back
in the
out on
morning.
patrol. So that's where, that, from the town's, from a selfish point of view, that's where it helps the town, I think.
It works better for you gentlemen too, right? Because you know when you're on,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
that's,
we knew when we were on before that. It was a week on, a week off.
right, but now it's,
And we still run that because you're still doing things other than arraignments. You still do search warrants and arrest
Right.
warrants and all that kind of stuff. This really came about though, there were actually lawsuits against the state. And there was a settlement that required that you have counsel at every arraignment. So if we-
Defense counsel.
Right, defense counsel.
You'd
So if-
never see a prosecutor out at 2:00.
Right. So if they didn't switch to a centralized arraignment system, what that would mean is we'd actually have to get public defenders
Out of
in
bed at 2:00 in the morning.
at each court at whatever time.
Yeah, and God forbid there'd be six arrests in the space of 2 hours.
Right. So I think they switched to a central arraignment, and it actually requires a change in legislation so that we can actually comply with the criminal procedure law, so that when we do central arraignment like this morning, I was sitting as both a Scotia Village judge and as a Glenville Town judge. And then whoever the next arraignment is, if it's a Niskayuna, then I'm back to, you put on the Niskayuna hat and you're the Niskayuna judge. But in order to do that, you actually have to be designated as central arraignment court so that you actually have jurisdiction over those defendants. But it was, the central arraignment came about because of the requirement for counsel at
Every
every
stage of-
appearance. The budgetary impact on the public defender's office would have been astronomical. So this is the solution that Schenectady County and a lot of the other local counties have come up with.
shared services works, right? I mean,
Well, it does. I mean, we all share the public defender's office. The problem is we can't all share them throughout the night at every different court. So
Right.
it just wasn't going to work. So now there's just like we have an on-call for central arraignment, so does the public defender's office and the conflict defender's office. So we know who's coming in. They're on all week with us. So I'm lucky I get Joe Litz, who's my normal public defender. So he and I know one another, and the arraignments go really well. But it's worked well
great.
so far. We have even fewer bells and whistles, I think, than the town attorney's office. But
We've asked everybody that the numbers that are in this budget for this year adequately fund your department for the next year.
yeah, we've got 11 in right now for the police overtime
And
for this
that's what we were
year.
discussing.
For this year,
Moving more next year. on
so we're
police
budgeting
overtime.
12. So I if everything stays more or less the same, that should be sufficient.
Well, I'm going to I highlighted that for myself to just double check and make sure that that's adequate based on what we're seeing right now.
We try to say that, and it's, I've asked all the department heads that. And sort of the reason this kind of is a historical perspective that, the department heads wouldn't come back mid-year and say, I need 2 more people or whatever, and that's not budgeted for. And so that's why we sort of asked that, so the board has an idea that you've looked at these numbers and
Right.
that all the
Right,
department
we're
heads
not-
are comfortable
yeah,
with it.
We're overwhelmed. We're gonna,
Yep.
our requests are very specific to our operations.
Yeah, we try never to do that, but to a much lesser extent than, for example, highway, if we get a dozen blizzards,
Yeah.
he's going to come to you and say, well, we
Yeah,
didn't
we don't
budget
have-
for a dozen
Well, that's
blizzards.
that's
Right.
different. It's,
It's on a much smaller scale, the same kind of thing here. We have the cases that we have.
right.
If suddenly,
Yeah, if there's a
We-
raid on a meth lab somewhere, which
Right.
was in Skip.
or if there's
And we've got 15 defendants and,
the bigger one would be if there's a change in the state law that stops the
That-
pause
that's
on all
right.
these civil proceedings,
Yeah.
then we will see a huge influx in those. And that might happen because as far as I'm aware, a couple of those programs, they're out of money. So,
ERAP stopped as of August 31st.
Right. so that's gonna happen at some point. We hope as it happens, it's a kind of a slow uptick, not all at once, but Usually the things that impact us like that are things we don't control. Change in the state law, another pandemic that requires us to do something different. But otherwise, I think this budget is sufficient. Like I said, I do want to look into what it would be to reclassify the clerks. But part of that's, I think, part of a longer term process.
Is the third clerk, is that budgeted?
The third clerk
for?
is in there.
Okay.
If you look at the old, the 29 or 2019, 2020, 2021, you can see the budget lines for part-time.
Yep.
They now went to zero in 2022, and there was an increase
In
in the full-time. We just folded those part-time positions into the full-time. Like I said, as of right now, it's unfunded, or not unfunded, unfilled as
It's
of right
funded
now.
as a vacant.
We've got a lot of that. We've got funded, but not filled
Right.
in all departments.
Right, that doesn't surprise me, given the labor scene right now.
Thank you.
Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you. Sorry to drag you in from dog walking.
Well, you'll have to apologize to my dog.
Please.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Since we are ahead of schedule and I cut my own department out when we were moving things around, do you mind if we cover the comptroller's department really quickly while we're all here?
I do not mind.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea.
All right. It's a quick.
Yeah, that's a great
conversation.
idea. So you're last then.
I-
I'm just looking at the schedule. We did the attorney, Central Justice Department, great.
Yep. I was originally supposed to be with the town attorney. We had to do some maneuvering, so we have shifted that a little bit. So I'll just speak quickly to it. It's 1315 if you want to scroll down a little bit. You can see ours actually decreases a bit for salary reasons. I'm a bargain. You're lucky to have me. We have also pulled out of the personal services because we've been using the HR with the public sector HR. We've pulled them out to the consultant services line alongside an allotment for a grant writer. I know we would like to get back into having an independent grant writer for the town, so we've budgeted for that. And then we have also budgeted a little bit less next year for our independent auditor. This year is a little bit higher because we are doing the periodic audit of all the elected official accounts, which will be happening in November for the clerk's office and the receiver of taxes and the justice court. That's only done every several years, but this year was one of the years to do that. So that's why it was a little higher this year, and then we're dropping that back down a little bit next year for just our standard audit. I'm probably the only department that's quite happy with my level of personnel. We are good. We have a good team. Everybody works really well together. We've got a really good system of backing each other up. We've worked at getting some redundancy in there, and it's going well. So we're not looking to hire anybody right now. And everything we're doing has already been budgeted for. The Munis upgrade that we're currently working on, we're working through. It's going, the next phase starts in February, but it looks like it's going to be a good product once we get it all up and running across the town. They're shifting from kind of the standalone platforms that we've been using to more of a hub platform. It's a little bit more interactive. People can tailor it to their own preferences a little bit more. So we're hoping that that'll make it just a little bit more convenient for the various departments to see where they stand with their budget and kind of how it's going for them. Our biggest lift this year has been switching over the banking. It's been a massive undertaking. We're very close to the end of it, other than burning up a couple of computers, which I wasn't kidding about. It's gone quite smoothly. The new banking with JP Morgan Chase has been fantastic. Their services are really good. Their interaction with their websites for us to be able to see our accounts better, to be able to pull reports more effectively. I'm very happy with what we've been seeing. They've been very responsive. So that's been a really good thing to see. It's been a lot of work, and it's been a lot of work for all the other departments too. And we've had really just great cooperation across the town with the different department heads, working on moving their accounts over, learning this new system, learning how to do their own check runs through these check readers. There's been a lot. It's been a lot of work for people and a lot of learning, and they've been great about it. And I really appreciate the amount of just hard work people have put into this process. I'm very happy that we're able to take care of all of our banking in-house and not have people carrying large sums of cash and checks outside of the building, even across town. That's a risk that we don't want to take. We don't want to put that kind of risk on our personnel, and our insurance is actually quite happy that we're not doing it that way any longer either. So hopefully they will reflect that in next year's rates. We were able to do a really good job with our health insurance for next year. We don't really talk about that, but the benefits are expensive. Our employees are absolutely worth it. They're our best asset, and it's our job to take care of them. We were able to keep our health insurance costs at only an 8% increase, which 8% sounds like a lot until you realize that we're living in a world of 9% inflation. And the initial numbers that our insurance broker came to us were well into the double digits. And we worked very hard with them to pull those down to 8%. So we're very happy with that. We're still waiting just to get some finalized numbers on some of our retirement numbers that we're just working on still. But everything is built in as close as we can get it right now, and I'll be refining those numbers as we go forward and I get better information. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with where we've managed to get those. So that's it, unless you have any other questions for me.
You did leave off the employee handbook,
Oh, yes.
your department.
Yes, that was, and actually there are hard copies of that available for everybody now. We did get those back from the printer. But that is one of the things with keeping the public sector HR as consultants. They did that as part of their monthly fee for us. It was definitely a needed update. We're very happy with the support we've had from them. They're very reasonable, and they're always available when we've had questions. Just for some, minor disciplinary things and whatnot, just to make sure that everything's done correctly. They've been excellent, and I'm happy to keep them. Okay, we can scroll down there too.
Did you have a question?
Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know if Janet was asking. So for the grant writer, how does that work with salary versus how many hours they'll dedicate to grant writing?
So we were going to do that as a consultant because we can't find anybody who's willing to do that as even a part-time position. There have been a couple different searches. There are a lot of different grant writers out there that we can look into hiring. Specifically, I would recommend us going with somebody who's got experience more on the infrastructure side of grant writing, water, sewer related. There are some excellent opportunities available out there right now with all the federal funding for infrastructure. And getting a grant writer who is particularly skilled in that aspect of grant writing, I think would be well worth the town's
So
while.
they would
at
like
this point.
specialize in that department?
Absolutely, with those kind of background specializations. And they often know what those buzzwords and keywords are that are going to get the grant, vice not. And depending on what aspect of grant writing people are in, there are different focuses. So
Yes.
that's something that I think the infrastructure piece is where I think we would get the most bang for our buck at this point, quite frankly.
So, thank you for asking that, Jessica. How are we going to find this person? Because we've struggled with this.
So there are
Lot.
several companies out there. We've actually gotten a few letters recently of different groups that do grant writing specifically for infrastructure related. Labarge Group, Barton LaJudas. We've had a few of different ones send us just kind of, hey, this is one of our areas we do work in. And we had spoken to the supervisor about doing an RFP for grant writing along those lines. Or even if we didn't do a full formalized RFP, just reaching out to a couple of those different groups and seeing what they might offer to the town. And there aren't that many of them. So it's pretty easy to do a cursory search and just reach out to the various companies that do that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we need to do that. We've spent
Yes.
money on our infrastructure in the town. We've been conscious of that, but there is definitely more that can be done and more that we need to
Absolutely.
do. And so, you would think that might give us a little bit of leg up, but probably not. People that, municipalities that haven't, spent any money on their infrastructure may get more funds, but, hopefully we can, get some of these funds and continue the good things that we have done.
If there was ever a time, I would say now is the time that we are more likely to get it, just because of the push at the national level to fund infrastructure. I think that we have better odds now than we ever would otherwise. Unfortunately, a lot of times with infrastructure grants, they typically are need-based, either based on the need by lack of income for your population or need based on status of your infrastructure. And this is where having a fantastic water and sewer department like we do, who do such a great job. Unfortunately, they do such a great job that we don't look as needy as other municipalities sometimes. So it is because of their good hard work that our systems are functional. However, people with less functional systems typically get the money. So that's why now when there is a national push for infrastructure support is a good time for us.
Right, but our department has a wish list, right? In water
Absolutely,
and sewer, and
absolutely.
they've got a list. So all they need to do is say asked, and they'll put together all the stuff they could use and need to repair and replace.
So I'm scrolling down to shared services here. All right. Flip a couple pages here. All right, so if you want to go down to section 1620 is shared services for the building. Oh, you want to go all the way down to
1620
Yeah, it's usually Ray is 1620. So, okay, we'll go down to 16.
and 70. You got both.
Okay. Yep, on the same page. All right. So the main increase that you're seeing on the shared services for the administration section is postage, quite honestly. Postage has increased significantly, and with COVID, we're seeing a lot more of our interaction with the public being through the mail, specifically, especially from the clerk's office and the receiver of taxes office. So there's been a significant increase in that, and so that's why you'll see that our postage line has jumped up rather considerably. So that was our largest increase in that section, was for the postage.
So is that people are coming or communicating with them more by mail? They're mailing in their tax bills
Absolutely.
and
So you're
payments,
seeing
and then we
people-
have to mail the receipt back where
Absolutely.
they might have walked it into town hall in the past?
Correct. Yes. And for example, with all the birth certificates, remember that we do all the birth certificates for the Bellevue Women's Hospital, which is a lot of children born there on an annual basis. So our clerk's office is doing all that via mail as well. So that is quite a lot of postage. So that is our main increase there. I'm sure Ray will speak to it tomorrow, but since we have it up, the shared services for the building section, the main increase there is the significant increase you'll see, and the 2,000 line for capital outlay, but that's specifically for repairs to town hall. That has to do with the leaks we've been having, and with the police department having huge sections of the ceiling falling down. We've had several others over on our side of the building as well. I had a very nice water feature down my wall one day. We've had with the various repairs for the walls that have needed to be taken down, that we're seeing the problems with the Sally port. It also has to do with working on some of the concerns I know that Chief Cochin has brought up with accessibility with the entryway into the police department, getting that so it's more handicap accessible. So we did allocate quite a substantial amount of money into that line to do all the needed repairs on this building. Unfortunately, buildings age and things start deteriorating, and we're at that point. So if we take care of things now and fix them before they become a very large problem, that would be advised before it becomes a significant expense.
So that sort of segues into when you first began about spending money and not bonding and using money in certain ways. Would we be evaluating these repairs and things that we were going to be doing to town hall or any of our facilities, deciding whether we're going to try to use fund balance, budget for those, and or bond for them? So I guess in your opinion, what would be the time frame that we would want to bond, the life of something rather than purchase it?
Right. So what we typically see with the bonding is you want to bond something that will still have full value through the life of the bond, right? So for example, When we're talking about the repairs that are needed for the water tanks that haven't been recoded, that was discussed this morning in the
Public Works,
Thank you. I
yes.
couldn't think of the right name here. All that I was
Been a
thinking was
long
public
day.
safety, and I knew that was the wrong word. So that Matt was discussing this morning, right? So that hasn't been done in so long. Like whereas a recoding would have lasted 5 to 10 years, and now we're to the point where we have to completely sandblast these and start from scratch, right? And because of that, it's going to be, instead of a few $100,000, it's going to be several millions of dollars. So this is where you look at those things. If you're doing something that it was only going to be, okay, so if we're just recoding and we've done it 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that's a great time to just use fund balance for something because it's, say, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, right? Now we're doing $5 million worth of work on those things because we've neglected them so long. Now we bond for it, knowing full well that that large piece of work is going to last 25 years, provided that we're good stewards of it in the meanwhile and do those small incremental repairs along the way. And I think that is looking at this building right now. This building is in pretty good shape. It's a reasonably new building, but we're starting to see problems. We have flooding under certain doors. We have issues where if we repair those now before they're a significant problem, it's something we can work into the budget this year, some repairs, next year, a few repairs. We work those in so that we're keeping up with the maintenance so that it doesn't become a huge capital project where we've got foundational issues, say, that need a significant amount of money.
Right,
put,
right. And we've
So
done,
that's-
and we've done some of that, and some of it we try
Absolutely.
to do in-house. We've struggled with this area back here behind
Yes.
us in that we wanted to try to get that up. We can't even find a contractor to come
Right,
and
absolutely.
bid to do the work. So what's that mean? Well, that means we got to do it in-house with
Right.
our
and
own
they're-
people,
They've been
which-
doing a really nice job starting to get that prepped.
Right.
So, but that's, rule of thumb generally is if something's not going to last at least 15 years, you probably don't want to bond for it. Right? That's where you'll use the bond anticipation notes, which is a ban. Those,
I would agree with that. And isn't there some restrictions? You can't take, stuff that's short term and try to bond it long term.
Correct.
Right? So there
correct.
are restrictions.
So, and that's
in
where
there.
you use those shorter terms, the bond anticipation notes. Those can roll up to 5 years, which has been done for a lot of things, including things that probably shouldn't have been done quite that way. Although I will say at the time, with interest rates as low as they were, it was a very good way of kind of making the budget stretch farther than it could have. So these rules of thumb are only so good because the environment that you're working in changes over time, right? So if there's a time where you don't have a lot of fund balance and interest rates are really low, sometimes it does make sense to use those short-term loans to stretch your budget a little bit. Right now, with interest rates high, we have ample fund balance. So now we kind of shift our approach, right? We tailor our approach to the time that we live in. That's why we need to have those conversations to say, what is the priority and how do you want to pay for it? And what do we actually need to do, vice what do we need to start planning for? That was one of the long conversations that Seth and I had about all the computers that need to be replaced. Is that's a lot. How do we break that into manageable chunks so that we can do it a little bit at a time, not putting the whole system at risk, because we need to have the technology where we can have the multi-factor authentication and keep our security high where we need it for the network, but still replace the computers in a way that we can budget for it over the 3-year period. And that's kind of when we were sitting with each of the department heads, we would say, yes, what do you want to do next year? That's great. But what are your big plans? What do you want to do over the next several years? And how do we start kind of breaking that up? And we're going to start working longer term at setting ourselves up for success. as we
You
go
and I have
forward.
had that conversation.
Yes, we
and,
have.
and the supervisor and I have the same conversation. Let's get long-term thinking here.
Give me 3
okay?
years. That's what I always say. Give me
Okay.
3 years to plan.
We need that here. We need a 5-year. And actually, when you went to when I first got elected, and that was many years ago, and the Association of Towns puts on the education for elected officials, that just stuck in my mind, that long-term, you want to pressure, not pressure, but talk to the supervisor, get a long-term 5-year budgeting type of plan. And we've neglected to do that here. I keep asking for that, and I will continue to, but I like your line of thinking that is definitely something that we have to do.
And that's something where you see right now, so where we're pulling this equipment back into the budget, that sets us up to force that longer term planning, right? So now we're looking at what pieces of equipment need to be replaced and when we're replacing them. And because we're not just saying, oh, we're just going to bond for that. No, what do you actually need next year? What are you going to need the year after that and the following year? And really start looking at our vehicle replacement schedule over the longer term so we can parse that out and know you're only going to get to do X amount each year. So prioritize and let's figure out where we need to be and set that up on a rotational basis. So
Yeah.
you can't replace your whole fleet.
We've done that with the police department finally. It took a while, but we got on a rotational basis. We know what these cars are going to do. We know how long they're going to last. And at a certain point in time, we can get some money out of them and we get another one.
And that's it. Yep.
And it's working. It's
Yeah.
working.
And we're very fortunate that we have some excellent maintenance folks in our highway department. They are able to do an incredible job. We get a lot more life out of vehicles here
Things are treated
than a lot of other
properly.
places. And that's part of it as well,
They don't
right?
abuse their equipment.
Absolutely. And when you're keeping things stored properly and you're doing that progressive maintenance on things, they're doing it right. Now we just need to plan to ensure that we can afford to replace things on a timely fashion and keep the fleet where it needs to be, and keep everybody safe. And we'll get there. We've got a good way ahead.
Right. And a lot of things come into this budgeting. It's very important. And the reason, and I'm glad we started in the beginning with the page you had that talked about all the expenses and fund balance, because sometimes we have better years than other years, right?
Absolutely.
And I always ask, in April, okay, how'd we do last year? How'd we do last year, right? Because Janet knows, right? Because we don't. We think we're going to get this much revenue in, and our expenses, we're very, I think, conscious on expenses, right? We watch those. We do. And that's important. Your office does a great job with that. And again, it's very important. Sometimes we don't watch so much the revenues, right? And sometimes we have years where the revenues are better than others. Mortgage tax, and there's a lot that goes into the revenue
Absolutely.
line to the town, right? And then we have some years better than others, and those are the things that we want to kind of project out. And in the past, the board, we've been taking some heat about spending fund balance, but it was sort of a conscious decision, and we're continuing on it. You can only have so much fund balance. Right? Gets too high, it's too much, right? We got a good bond rating. That's the other thing. And I've asked this question to other controllers, and nobody has really ever answered it. What a municipality our size, what size debt should they, I say, carry, or where is the sweet spot, if you will, of debt for a municipality at the size of Niskuna with the revenues that we have? I think we're probably there because we have a very good bond rating, and that you have to be conscious of that. You don't want to get over,
Right.
because you're going down the wrong road.
Yeah. And the reason you wouldn't get a good answer is there isn't a good answer, right? Because so much of it depends on the environment that you're in, right? So right now we have a good fund balance. We have really good interest rates. So our fund balance is growing better now than usual, which is great. Our debt that we have a considerable lot of debt. However, a lot of it is at incredibly low interest rates. So it's not causing us any hardship to make the payments. And that's it's always that balance, right? So it's always balancing what you're bringing in and what's going out, and then how you're reacting to the environment that you're in. Right now, when we see that the interest rates are going up the way they are, we've started some serious conversations in our department. We do investments with NICLAS, and we're looking at our cash flow and taking chunks. How much can we actually take and do in longer term investments? Like, can we take a big hunk of that revenue that we get in at the beginning of the year and do a 6-month investment where we can't touch it, but it earns a lot higher interest than we would typically have in the accounts where we're pulling in and out from, right? So we look at a lot of that stuff, and we have a lot of those conversations of, well, how much can we invest? Now that the rates are going up, we really need to be investing more. Whereas for the last several years, the rates were negligible. So that really wasn't as much a consideration because there was no interest to really gain from, right? So we have a lot of those very, very exciting conversations up in our department on how we're moving money. I know, we're like, ooh, this is super fun, right? But no, we're always looking at that. How do we manage our money? How do we move it? How do we invest it? How do we do it so that we are doing the best possible job for the taxpayers of this town? Because that's what we're meant to be doing, right? How do we take care of those tax dollars? And to your point, that's what the fund balance is. That is tax dollars, right? So using that to keep the tax rate low, you're using tax dollars to keep tax dollars low, which is a very good use of fund balance, right?
Absolutely. It's
So
the
that's what it's meant
taxpayers'
for.
money. It's their money,
Absolutely.
not the town's money. It's our
Exactly.
taxpayers'
It's all the
money.
taxpayers' money. And it's our job to be good stewards of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah. But yeah, I could talk all day about exciting things like interest rates.
So I think that concludes our briefing for this evening. Tomorrow, we will reconvene at 10 a.m. And of course, department heads will be talking about their budget requests, and town board members will be present, and the public is invited to attend and listen. And I think that's all we have for tonight. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.